Yeah.
Everybody.
We'll
We'll be afraid.
The next day was the beginning.
I know Kurt, come have a seat. Ready? Ready? Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I'd like to call to order the meeting for the State Board of Medical Licensure. We will proceed according to our agenda. And so the first thing on our agenda today is our invocation, which will be led by Dr. Alan Gersh, and afterwards we will be led into the pledge by none other than Ron Gibbons.
Lord, as we begin this meeting, I ask that you bless us with your presence and your wisdom. We live in difficult times and we need the help and wisdom. This group here is here to help its fellow man. And I believe is doing God's work. I ask for everybody who came here to go back home when they leave in health and safety. And I ask this in thy name. Amen.
Approach the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to start with acknowledging our special guests. First is Miss Shanna Cumberland, who's our court reporter, and our wonderful AG representative, Miss Alexis Morris. Thank you for being here and for your assistance. At this time, we will open the floor if there are announcements or public comment. And hearing none, we will move on to our reappointment.
If I could have Dr. Loper, Dr. Johnson, and Dr. McClendon, please, across the room. Raise your right hand. And repeat after me. I state your name. Do solemnly swear or affirm
Do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will faithfully support the Constitution of the United States
that I will faithfully support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Mississippi,
and the Constitution of the State of Mississippi,
and obey the laws thereof,
and obey the laws thereof,
that I am not disqualified from holding the office of member,
that I am not disqualified from holding the office of member
of Mississippi State Board of Medical Licensure,
of Mississippi State Board of Medical Licensure,
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
that I will faithfully discharge the duties of the office
upon which I am about to enter.
upon which I am about to.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
From the governor's office. Dr. Quindle, Dr. Loper. Let Jay get a picture of the yelling holding those. That would be wonderful. And also your oath of office that you just took, and we won't make a big deal out of these.
Just so that you don't forget it. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
All right, and Ken, you want to do the?
Yeah.
Okay.
At this time, I'd like to ask Angie Williamson to come up, please.
Front and center.
You can't avoid this now, Angie. So Angie is one of those employees you really hate to lose because she has worked in many different areas of the board and she's been here since 2007, if I have that correct. So originally coming as a temp, she worked in the Department of Licensing. And then she moved to the front desk as a full-time employee, I believe, right, for 2 years. Yep. And then found her home for the next however many years were left in the IT department until recently. And then, so I think what is also noteworthy is in 2020, Angie became a U.S. citizen and participated in her first presidential election shortly thereafter, right? So we recognize Angie today for all of her service to this agency and to the state of Mississippi. And I have a resolution that I would like to read into the record. Whereas Angie Williamson faithfully and conscientiously served the state Board of Medical Licensure as the projects officer for 16 years. And whereas Mrs. Williamson discharged her duties with firmness, dignity, and compassion, always striving to implement both the spirit and letter of the Mississippi Medical Practice Act, thereby working for the greater benefit of the board and citizens of the state of Mississippi. And whereas during her years of service, Mrs. Williamson continually and graciously gave her efforts, time, and abilities for fulfilling her responsibilities as the project officer for the board, always respecting the rights of licensees, patients, and others while performing her duties. Therefore, be it resolved that the Mississippi State Board of Medical Licensure, on behalf of the board and the people of the state of Mississippi, by means of this resolution, express to Mrs. Williams its gratitude and appreciation for her services during the years she devoted to the board and the state of Mississippi. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be spread upon the minutes of the board and a copy be given to Mrs. Williamson, expressing to her the highest esteem of the board. Congratulations. Would you like to say a few words?
Just that I really love my time here at the board, and I was always very proud to be able to work here and stuff, and I miss you all very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, every couple of months, we have the opportunity to come here and sit before you dressed in nice clothes. But the truth is that it's our staff that really keeps this place running day in and day out. And we probably don't have an opportunity to really acknowledge the contributions that they make to helping us do our jobs, but also the way that they serve our licensees and really are extensions of us in our charge to protect the public. So we like to acknowledge that when we're reflecting back, but I also want to say that for the people who are still here, we've got a great group of folks, a wonderful team, and we truly would not be able to do what we do if it weren't for our great staff. So thank you for your service, and thanks to the rest of the folks who are still kind of out here in the weeds with us, trying to keep this thing going. So with that being said, we'll move on to the head of all of our staff, our executive director's report.
All right. So in licensure for May and June, we issued 113 new MD-DO license, 2 podiatry, and 9 PAs. In addition to those that were issued through what we'll refer to as standard licensing, we issued 105 licenses to the medical compact, and we provided 1 letter of qualification. To other states, we did 446 certifications. Investigations in May and June, we received 96 complaints. We were able to close 35 cases. We opened 34 new cases, giving us a total number of cases open of 69. Cases closed within 7 days is 93%. We requested 117 PMP reports, 46 of which required further investigation. Oh, that came out smaller than I wanted. So this is the renewal numbers, 92% of MDs and 80% of the compact MDs, 91% of the DOs, 85% of DO compacts, 92% of podiatrists, 90% of PAs, for an all across the average board of, we had 90.6% of our licensees renew with us this past year, which is about what we see every year. And once again, I showed this slide last time, but we have new committees and new committee chairs. And I would really like the committee chairs to reach out to me to set a time that we can have a committee meeting for each committee between each board meeting. And we can always not follow through with that committee meeting if we don't have anything to discuss or there's no new agenda items for it. But I would just like to get a standard time for every committee so that we can continue to do the work of the medical board. With that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Thank you, Dr. Cleveland.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll move to the approval of the minutes. These have been provided in advance and are also included in front of each of you on your binders. So if you will, please, we'll review, if you've not already, the minutes of the executive committee for May 17th, 2023. Are there any additions or corrections?
I move to accept the minutes.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Minutes stand approved as submitted. Moving on to the approval of the minutes for the board meeting for the subsequent day, May 18th of 2023. Any additions or corrections? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Who was that? Okay. And who's
And then done.
Moved by McClendon, seconded by.
Yeah. I'd say that.
All right,
the people?
all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, sorry. There was no discussion on that, guys. Was there? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, minutes stand approved as submitted. And next, the report of our executive committee meeting. Are you ready to give a brief overview? We'll hear from our secretary, just a brief overview of the executive committee report.
The executive committee met yesterday. We took up, I think, 4 issues, 3 issues. We approved suspension of the 2080 rule for practice requirements of the supervising physician to be in Mississippi for 1 such request, and we denied 2 such requests. And that will be the executive committee report. Is there anything else we need to report?
That's it.
That's it.
So you've heard the summary of the recommendations from the executive committee from yesterday. Do I have a motion to approve the report?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. This time we will move on to committee reports. Scope of practice, chaired by Dr. Kennard.
There's nothing to report for that committee meeting. Until I talk to Ken, and then there may be. So I'll let you know, to be continued.
Dr. Lippincott is not here. Is there a member of the Professional Health Program Committee that has anything to bring forward? Hearing none, we'll move on to the Telemedicine and Interstate Licensure Compact Committee. Dr. Givens.
No report, and as Dr. Kennard, pending assignment by Dr. Cleveland.
Okay. Welcome to the first look, the new year, right? Licensees, Education and Communication, chaired by Dr. McClendon.
No report.
Physician Advisory Task Force, Dr. Kennard.
Nothing to report at this time.
All right, we will move on to the last standing committee, which is Rules, Regs, and Legislative, chaired by Dr. Joyner.
We do have a report. We actually have 2 reports. It just deals with, it's going to be short and sweet because this was brought up, discussed, and approved at our last meeting. After it's approved, it has to sit before the public for 25 days, I believe it is. It has sat before the public for 25 days. Now it comes back to us for approval before it's being sent to the OLRC. So the first will be the practice of physician's assistants. I know of no change or comments that we received in the past 25 days. So I would you will entertain a motion.
So then a motion for to approve our final adoption of
Right.
the changes to regulation. I guess it's 2615, chapter 1. Is there a motion?
So move. Given.
Any discussion? All in favor and opposed? All right. That's part 1.
Yeah, hang on a second.
No worries, I got you. Dr. Dorner's doing double duty,
Yes,
committee
he is.
chair and secretary.
All right, the second is even easier. It's the chapter 2 cannabis certification. This basically reflects what is in statute that was given to us by the legislature. We have no wiggle room on this. We discussed that at the last meeting, and it was approved. It is set before the public for 25 days. There has been no complaints, comments, or suggestions for changes. And so therefore it is back with us to be approved to go to the OLRC. Madam President,
Okay, so this is going to be, I need a motion for final adoption of regulation part 2640, chapter 2.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor and opposed? All right, motion passes. And that,
that concludes our brief report.
all right,
Thank you.
thanks. Thanks so much to the Rules and Regs Committee. That is all of our committees work really hard, but that is a really hard working committee. Next on our agenda is a presentation by Delphine Shannon, Dr. Delphine Shannon. Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to present my request today. I'm requesting that the board consider my ability to still use compounded GLP-1 receptor agonist medication, such as semaglutide, for medication's amazing. I'm sure those of you in practice are aware of it. I'm sure you've heard of something in terms of how it's really changing the face of obesity and helping with weight loss and maintaining weight loss for a nation and a community that has a lot of weight to lose, unfortunately. The program that we run is very intense, lifestyle based. So we help our patients to make great changes with nutrition, with activity, with sleep, any hormonal or metabolic issues we address. The nice thing with this medication is it does address metabolic issues like the prediabetes or insulin resistance, in addition to just weight loss. So it has been very effective.
Question. So I have a question. Thank you for your presentation. Can you tell me just a little? I loved hearing about your practice. Tell me a little bit more about how this particular shortage has impacted your practice and your patients.
So they had started with a coupon a year and a half or so ago, which was amazing, and people were very excited about that. And then they started to, with Wegovy, that's Novo Nordisk, I should say. And then when they started to run out, then we weren't able to prescribe it, start anybody on it. And then in January, they had, the company told us that they had re-upped their supply and that everything would be okay, at least with Wegovy. They said Ozempic, in terms of diabetes, was still trying to continue filling their back stock. But with Wegovy, we're excited because we could then start prescribing again. But then in March or April, I think it may have been April, they came to us again and sent us a letter saying that we are not quite in shortage yet, but we're pulling the first 3 doses. So this medicine is titrated up over 5 months with a low dose, and slowly you go up to the highest dose, which is technically the therapeutic dose. So people lose a lot of weight along the way as well. And so they said we're pulling the first 3 doses of the titration curve because we are afraid we won't have enough of the last 2 doses. So they said so many people across the nation are being started every month on these doses that you need to start on to get to the upper doses. And we don't think we'll have the supply to be able to continue them. So we don't want any new starters. So that's basically the problem. The nice thing is that they're able to, each year it seems like Novo Nordisk is able to get more insurance companies to cover it, which is great for patients. But right now we can't start anybody on it, and only the people that are on the upper 2 doses have been able to continue.
Is there a significant difference also, this is partially just for my education, is there a significant difference? I know these are expensive medications because you mentioned insurance coverage in some instances. So what's the commercial cost typically, and how does that differ from your the compounded cost?
So the commercial cost is typically around $1,200 to $1,600 per month. And the Novo Nordisk does have a coupon for people that don't have insurance or where their insurance doesn't cover it. And so it's $500 off, but that still is at the cheapest, I suppose, around maybe $900 or so to $1,100 a month. And if it's covered by insurance, some insurance companies have quite large deductibles, not deductibles, copays, but some don't, some are really quite affordable. But Novo Nordisk has that coupon that they can even use towards the copay, which is nice. But the compounded ones cost usually somewhere between, depending on the dose and as you're going up on the titration curve, usually somewhere between 200 and 300-ish, around there.
Any other questions?
Yeah, this is the first proposition since the other rule that we induced that she described. You knew the rule probably better than I do because I'm asking this question, but
No problem.
she's following the proper procedure. She's just requesting, and then it's our decision to approve a special request. But for the board members that use this, Has anything changed outside of the FDA really cautioning against using the salt? Because I was aware of that too, just over medical wires and things, just highlights. Are there any other concerns that have come out about the drug that would put someone's license at risk or just patients at risk for side effects?
So, certainly the FDA comes out with their typical regulatory statements about safety.
Yeah.
And that if it's not going through the regulatory process, how can we guarantee the safety? That being said, anecdotally, of course, I also temporarily, full disclosure, I'm an internal medicine doctor and temporarily use the compound semaglutide because of the enormous help that it provides for our patients, and then stopped when the regulatory changes came out.
Yeah.
But other than, it was the same experience. Obviously you're going to see, I think, in about 15 to 20% of patients that you're going to have some of the typical GI upset that basically causes a mild gastroparesis.
Yeah.
And constipation. And so I proactively give people a PPI and Miralax that also helps significantly with those symptoms. But nothing outside of the norm of compared to the FDA approved form of it.
Mm-hmm.
I believe is basically the same product. And we're having the same exact results and typical side effects.
The Board of Pharmacy is obviously under some scrutiny from the FDA as well.
Board of Pharmacy is here today and can speak to this.
Okay.
So I would exactly, and if there are
Any
other
other
questions for
questions?
Dr. Shannon, I guess.
Because I would really like to kind of hear, there's been some buzz about the pharmacy side, and since that's kind of outside of what our knowledge, I think it would be great to hear from them too. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. My name is Susan McCoy. My name is Susan McCoy, and I'm the Executive Director for the Board of Pharmacy here in Mississippi. Thank you for allowing me to come speak with you today about the Board of Pharmacy's concerns, the safety concerns for the compounding of unapproved FDA medications for weight loss. The board and staff have very real concerns about the stability, sterility, and effectiveness of the active pharmaceutical ingredients, the powders that are being used to compound these medications. The records that we're receiving from pharmacies indicate that many are still using the salt forms even after the FDA and we have put out our notice, or something that's a little different lately is they're using chemically synthesized product. The forms of semaglutide will take you back to your organic chemistry days, but that's what, it's not the exact same thing. The branded product is made from a yeast derived product. These are chemically synthesized. These are different than the patented product by Novo that have been tested for all the FDA criteria. Many of the received certificates of analysis that we're receiving and getting in do not have the required elements, which means there's no proof of the legitimacy of the product. These active ingredients are being manufactured in China, and without these records, there's a real scenario that they could be manufactured under insanitary conditions. The manufacturers of the active ingredients are registered with the FDA, but they've not actually been inspected since all of this has started coming about. Some of them have never been inspected at all. They just have to register with the FDA, which is a real concern for us. Some records indicate that the drugs that are coming in are for research and development only, and then we have information that they're being imported, and upon receipt in the United States, they're being relabeled as the base product. FDA as recently as last week, as you can imagine, we've been in close contact with FDA over these because obviously we can't do anything about importation, or we can't do anything about, so we were working closely with FDA on this, and they indicated to me personally that there's no currently approved semaglutide base product that's available that falls into the criteria that they need to meet to compound this product. The other GLP-1 receptor agonists would need to follow the same FDA criteria in order to be compounded under these current regulations. I would like to take this moment just to address the pharmacy, just to show you how this is an example of what we're dealing with at the Board of Pharmacy with this.
This pharmacy, Hallandale, that has been reaching out to physicians, is located in Florida. And they actually applied for a renewal of their pharmacy license and their compounding certificate, which we require from the Board of Pharmacy in December of 2021. All of those compounding certificate applications are reviewed by our staff, by our pharmacists that know those rules and knows what the right way and the wrong way to do things. This compounding certificate from Hallandale was denied based upon a warning letter from the FDA concerning insanitary conditions and other inspection deficiencies. Their visit resulted in a recall of a product from Hallandale. They also had deficiencies from their own state inspection. The lack of response when we reached out to them showing that these deficiencies had been resolved resulted in the denial. As a result of this denial, they don't have the authority to ship these compounded products into our state, but they're doing it. These deficiencies have nothing to do with the weight loss medications, but it just illustrates how some pharmacies are totally disregarding the compounding standards that the FDA and the states have put in place just to make the money. We've got questions about the legitimacy of the product from Hallandale for the semaglutide base on the documents that Hallandale has provided to us. The certificates of analysis and invoices indicated that the criteria for safe ingredients have not been met. The marketing letter that was distributed to the practitioners and practices holds many untruths. The standards that have been created both by law and by the United States Pharmacopoeia, or better known as USP 797, have proven time and again that they are necessary to protect our public. The ingredients themselves need to be vetted along with the compounding standards of clean rooms and their personnel for sterile product compounding. Without these standards being enforced by FDA and our states, the public is very much at risk. The Board of Pharmacy is working diligently to protect our patients, but we need your assistance in this manner. The Board of Pharmacy and its staff, and I want to make this clear, that we do believe that compounding is an essential part of taking care of patients. We're not in question whether compounding should or should not be allowed in the normal process. This particular section of drugs is causing a lot of concern and heartache for us. That being said, all laws and standards should be followed to ensure the safety and effectiveness of these compounds. I will be glad to answer any questions that I can. We've got several active cases on this issue, and I may not be able to elaborate, but I will do the best I can. Thanks again for allowing me to state the Board of Pharmacy and our staff's position.
So, and you kind of discussed it at the end. Why is this situation, I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear yours. Why is this situation different from every other compounded medication?
The situation makes it different. Number one, these pharmacies, because of the popularity of this, they're pharmacies, but they're acting like manufacturers. So normally the FDA allows pharmacies to compound one-off prescriptions, or a few of a certain product. And so the amount of people that they affect are not near as many as these large pharmacies that are doing this. These pharmacies are basically manufacturers because they're making large quantities of these drugs. So they have the potential to affect more people if they're doing it wrong than, say, the regular compounding pharmacy that's just doing one or two prescriptions at a time. We're also very concerned because the semaglutide and the other GLP-1 receptor modulators are, I'm sorry, I'm just going blank on that. But anyway, those drugs we know they're coming from China. That's where all of the records that we've all received, the powders are coming from China, and they just do not have the certificates of analysis that address the products that are being used. And that is our biggest concern right now, is because we have no idea what's in these products for sure, because they're lacking information on these certificates of analysis, and because we feel like we have proof that some of them are being used for research. They're research and development drugs, so that means they haven't been fully tested and fully vetted. So those are very real concerns that the powders that are in these products are not what they say they are. And if they are, we don't have the proper documents to prove that they are. And that's what, our role is at the Board of Pharmacy is to help ensure that the products that y'all are all prescribing are safe for your patients. And we have to, that is part of our job at the board, is to be able to make sure that the products are there so that you can feel comfortable that the products that you're prescribing are meeting those standards that the FDA has set in place.
Are you investigating those pharmacies?
I can't speak to that right now. That's one of the things.
So can So, but could you also speak though to, because my view of it is that there's a patent on this chemical. And so that's the main issue. That's the regulatory issue. That's the companies, the pharmaceutical companies issue, is that there's a patent.
Yes, that's their issue, yeah.
I have a question. Since the manufacturing's not FDA approved, does a prescribing physician get some responsibility in a lawsuit for prescribing that drug?
Well,
I've been told that.
Yeah, I'm not an attorney, so I can't answer that question, but I will tell you and go back to address the Novo. Novo has put out plenty of statements stating that they are not selling their product to anybody. They do have a patent on that powder. We're not in patent law. So the Board of Pharmacy is not charged with that, taking care of that. So we would not be the ones that would be enforcing that patent law. But we do enforce the products that are being used. And that's where our concern is the safety and effectiveness and the sterility of all of these products that are coming in.
I'd like to make a motion. There's nothing.
I have another.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I just want to understand, and I think I do understand it, is there's really not a source that has the quality control that other medications would. We don't get the certificates, we don't get the purity, none of those things. And there's no other source at the present time.
Currently, we have not seen any documentation to say that there is. FDA has, like I said, as late as last week, indicated to me that they have not approved any of the products. So and they're, have not been comfortable with what they're seeing either.
I understand the concern about the purity of the product, but is there any evidence of injury from these compounds or adverse events?
I think the FDA has received some of those adverse events. We don't receive those normally. I mean, we might get a complaint, but we don't delve that deeply into that. That's an FDA, they've got all the computer ways to track all of that and do all that. So most of those are reported into the FDA, into their hosted websites. So they are the ones that, but I have been told that there are some, I don't know what they are, but I have been told that they're there.
I think that what you mentioned, at least, or the concern that you raised, is pretty valid, because Dr. Dodson, to your point, sometimes it takes, the utilization of this medication has boomed, like it's skyrocketed. And those events will take a while cumulatively to actually be known widely. This reminds me of my thesis research that I did, which compared a medicinal grade or a pharmaceutical grade medication along with a medication that had been used in multiple research studies, but it was a lab generated form. And when we took the formulations between the pharmaceutical grade medication and the medication that had been published on widely, but that was not the same medication that was actually being used in the general population. And you could put those things in a mass spectrometer and you could see that there was a difference. But when you looked at the ingredients or what was put in the medications, there was no difference that was really documented. But there was clearly a difference in the way that the research animals that were exposed to the different medications, the different formulations, they responded totally different. And we could tell that there was something different about them, but there was no real way to know. And the labeling didn't show it, but there was a difference between the research grade or what was being used in the labs versus what was being manufactured and produced and sold according to FDA standards and regulations. So when you said that, that really triggered something, at least for me, because that's something that I've seen in a medication that we knew that was produced here in the United States, and definitely not something that was coming across the seas from other countries. So David, you originally were about to say something.
But I guess I just do want to make the point though, is that these pharmacies though are registered Mississippi licensed compounding pharmacies in the state of Mississippi.
Well, some are, some aren't. I mean, we're seeing, because the popularity of this drug is, as you can imagine, there's a lot of various players that are getting involved in this. I can tell you that we see product coming into here with some of our joint investigations that we've done. We've seen product coming into here from pharmacies that are not meeting the standards. And that is part of our problem. Number one, we've got some that are not getting licensed the way they're supposed to be. Hallandale being one of them. And they have sent massive amounts of this medication into our state. So that's a very real concern. Number two is the quality of the product that of the powders that they're using to compound. And the general pharmacy receives these certificates of analysis and it says semaglutide on there. So they think it's legitimately sort of semaglutide based. That's what they're thinking. Because especially since we put out our notice, which I think y'all all got a copy of, that we put out, I think back in April, that the semaglutide salts were not to be used. And so after that, we started seeing a change in those documentations that were coming in. And I think FDA has seen that as well. But they're not putting semaglutide USP on there. They're just putting semaglutide, which means it doesn't necessarily meet those standards like Dr. Owens was talking about. I mean, it can chemically be the same structure, but they haven't been created in the same process. And so if you don't compare apples to apples, then you can't be assured that the side effects and the effectiveness and all of the other things that go along with it are going to be the same.
And just another point, I do this all day long. My patients come to me begging for this medication. And we wouldn't be in the situation if Blue Cross of Mississippi and Medicare would pay for we go. And that's outside the scope and the regulatory aspects of everybody in here. But we wouldn't, and that's a big part of why we're in the situation, is that we can't get it to our people that can make a big difference in their health.
Dr. Shannon, I thought I saw you raise your hand. I wasn't sure
I did, thank you.
if you had
I
questions.
just wanted to ask this question. So that, respectfully, I thank you for that, they have, that they've been licensed, that they are licensed. But in terms of, the magnetite.
I'm sorry, we can't hear you. Do you mind? Thank you. Thank you.
So I wondered in terms of the semaglutide base that's coming from the API manufactured. So my understanding was that Novo Nordisk patent was on especially the delivery system of it, and that they may be getting that they're getting their source from similar places. Is that not true that you know of?
All I can tell you is I haven't been to Novo, so I don't know, and I can't answer that specific question. All I can tell you is Novo has put out multiple statements saying that they're not, as far as the patent goes, they're not selling that to anybody. And their process of creating this powder is part of that patent. And so nobody else can do it that way, because that's part of that patent. Now, like I said before, the patent thing that's between Novo and the pharmacies, or Novo and the manufacturers. And unfortunately, some of the doctors have been brought into that as well, I think. So, that's not Board of Pharmacy material. What we're worried about is the fact that the powders are being made and manufactured in different conditions than what we know is effective and what we know is safe, because they've done all the testing. These products that are being used, these APIs that are coming in now, everything that we've seen, now that doesn't mean next week we won't get one that says, that has all the things that it's supposed to. But as of now, everything that we have seen have not met the criteria to be the same. And to address Hallandale, I want to make sure they're only telling you half truth. They are licensed here, but it's their pharmacy, their commercial side, like their regular blood pressure medication or their regular diabetic medication or whatever, the commercial products, they do have a license to sell that in Mississippi. They don't have a license, or they don't have a compounding certificate to be able to compound and send those products into Mississippi. So that was what got denied, was the way that they were doing the compounds and the fact that they could not show us any different, that they had met the standards that they were supposed to meet. So they do have a license, but it's not for the compounded product. If that helps you. Okay.
Thank you.
Susan, it's my understanding that you may be able to share more information with the board in executive session.
Well,
If there's any more questions.
any other questions right now? There,
Move to close the meeting to consider whether to go into, to enter into executive session on this matter.
there's a motion and a second. Is there discussion?
Yes, ma'am. I would just like to say, Dr. Owens, that before the board goes back into closed session, consider that this would be an appropriate use of executive session under subsection D, investigative proceedings by any public body regarding allegations of misconduct or violations of the law. That would be a legitimate basis, I believe, the hearing officer for the board to go into executive session.
Thank you. So it's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. open session, and Dr. Joyner will read the decisions from executive session.
Okay, thank you. We actually voted on two things. The first thing that we voted on was to rescind our previous exemption from the rules and regulations previous. And the second, concerning request of diet medication regulation exemption, the board voted to deny.
Dr. Shannon, we appreciate you coming and your request. Considering the safety concerns, we just felt like at this time, we couldn't extend the request.
I appreciate the consideration, and I actually learned something from this one point, because I did not know what some of the things that were, I guess, half truths that I was told in writing. So thank you.
No,
you.
absolutely.
All of
Thank
us
you.
did.
Yes.
Yeah, and we are gonna, I think this was a great illustrative experience for what happens when we're able to work together and collaborate. And the Board of Pharmacy is working on their end, and we're gonna work to help make sure that all of our licensees have access to that information, that they know kind of the things to look for, so that they can continue to practice medicine. Like you came trying to do something to meet the needs of your patients. And as we're trying to do that, as we endeavor to do that, to make sure that we are aware of what to look for, so that we can make sure that we're doing what we need to do safely. So yeah, this is great. Thank you. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move along with our agenda.
Please.
Please.
Item 10 on the agenda is for informational purposes only. Dr. Scott Nelson has surrendered his medical license based on a criminal conviction, and that's a permanent surrender.
Paul,
Yes, sir.
his case is relatively public. Was there any attempt to rehab the situation from him? Can you speak to that?
I really can't. What I do know is that the case has been going on for a very long time, and they actually had reached a plea bargain, perhaps deal they thought a couple of years ago. But Dr. Nelson learned that if he took that plea, actually the district judge, I believe, Deborah Brown, rejected that plea deal. And as it turned out, he would have been pleading guilty to healthcare fraud, and that would have, cost him his license anyway. As it was, he went to trial, and he was found guilty. He's been sentenced, and now my understanding, he's imprisoned. He is appealing this to the Fifth Circuit, but as of now, he's a convicted felon. And the board's rules and the laws are fairly clear that when you're a convicted felon involving fraud, as long as you're even on probation, that, you can't practice medicine. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
You did. Good, thanks.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate case. Moving to item number 11, hearing in the case of Mayhart Forkova. This is a first motion for continuance. As is the case when it's first continuance, we see no basis to deny Dr. Forkova's motion.
Do you need us to vote? We do need to vote for that continuance. Am I not correct?
Yes, ma'am, but we need you to vote on each continuance.
Okay, sounds great. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And opposed? Okay.
Right, agenda item 11, very similar to the hearing in the case of Fatima Hussein. Dr. Hussein, this is what she was just charged and served, and this is the first motion for continuance. And so again, no reason to deny, in our opinion, Dr. Hussein's motion.
So at this time, I'll entertain a motion. Any discussion? All in favor?
Uh,
Aye. And opposed? Okay. Motion is granted.
And the board will need to vote on each of these next matters separately, but I would like to address items 13, 14, and 15 collectively to some extent. Number 13 is the case against Dr. Michael L. Sanders. Number 14 is a case against Dr. Stephen Sutter. And number 15 is the case against Dr. Peluso Baccarati, excuse me. These have been continued, some of them as many as 2 times before. These are each complex cases with extensive bodies of evidence. Multiple medical experts are involved. All 3 of these were originally, the board's scheduling issues for the month of July affected these hearings because they had problems with either expert witness of the defendants. They had made arrangements for the initial board meeting date. When that changed, we're unable to do it. And so the principles of fundamental, also in the case of Dr. Baccarati, we were just able to finally provide a number of digital imaging studies to his counsel so they would be considered by their experts. I believe principles of fundamental fairness require that Dr. Sanders, Dr. Sutter, and Dr. Baccarati each be granted a continuance. September is going to be a fun month. We believe that, and we very much hope that some of these will actually can be resolved without hearing. I know of one, I don't want to say which one, but one of these is going to result in a hearing. There are 2 others, I believe, may be resolved short of hearing. But I would request that the board grant vote separately for items 13, 14, and 15.
All right, so we will start with item 13, which is the hearing continuance for Dr. Sanders. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Any discussion?
Who was second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Okay. And the next for item 14, Dr. Sutter. Is there a motion?
So, second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And last, Dr. Baccarati. Is there a motion?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay. Those 3 motions for continuance are granted.
Agenda item 16 is an unopposed motion for continuance in the case against Dr. Gregory A. Ozan, is how his attorney pronounces his last name, Ozan. Until last week, we believed that we had this matter resolved and it would not be required a full evidentiary hearing. However, we were unable, and we just really realized last week we just could not reach any sort of a negotiated resolution through a consent order. Dr. Ozan needs additional time to prepare. He has not submitted his answer yet to the charge. And so I believe fundamental fairness should provide that Dr. Ozan be given the additional time necessary. And I can say this, some of you may know, and it's been in the papers, this is related to pain cream scheme is the kind of the way it's been named in the papers.
Okay, so is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And opposed? Motion's granted.
Okay. Agenda item 17 will actually require the board to make a determination. This is a petition to lift restrictions by Dr. Mark Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher is an MD. Dr. Fletcher's license was restricted in a consent order, which I believe should be in your book and should be available to you. And I will turn this over. I don't know if Dr. Fletcher has any. I believe he's out in the So let me go.
Anybody know offhand where the consent order is in our book?
It's in
Tab
behind tab 17.
17. Okay, thank you.
Introduce you. Again, this is Dr. Fletcher. He's appearing to request the restrictions on his license from a previous consent order. He left it out. Already have it, Dr. Fletcher. Thanks. Pretty straightforward what I want, and I've done my probation. I've met all the requirements laid in front of me by the board in 2017 when I signed my consent order. I would like to be restored to full status, in particular because we've got a provider shortage in my area, my specialty. And so the need is desperately there. I need to be able to work physician extenders to meet the demands. Excuse me, Dr. Fletcher. Technically, from the record, I believe that Dr. Fletcher's replacement, as he is presenting testimony. That's all. I don't know what else to say. I just need to ask your permission.
Dr. Fletcher, can you tell us a little bit about kind of what your practice has been like in the interim?
I'm going to restrict use of nurse practitioners, so it's significantly reduced the number of patients I can see and help manage. And like I said, there is a critical shortage. Well, there's a critical shortage of neurologists all over the country. It's not just here, but it's in particular acute in this state.
And with respect to your plan and the idea of collaboration, how many nurse practitioners do you anticipate collaborating with?
Between 2 and 3.
And will they all be on site with you, or are these at different locations?
No, they'll all be on site.
Any questions from the board?
Doctor, I realize it's all in here, but just like to hear from you, what was the problem and what did you learn from the discipline?
The problem was I had improper documentation on prescribing controlled substances. I went through my CME, I've studied, I changed the way I practice, changed the way I prescribe medicines, changed the way I do my documentation to be more in line with what standards should be.
Any further questions from any of the members of the board? Any motion?
I presume he's here and I'm not hearing any objection from our staff and council.
No objection.
Yeah, no objections from us. And the only thing I would say is, Dr. Fletcher, you do realize that we have the right to come by your clinic anytime and do follow-up inspections. So
Yes, sir, I do.
if you have learned your lessons and you're compliant with the standard of practice in medicine at this point.
I believe so, yes, sir.
And the collaboration with the nurse practitioners will also kind of expand your responsibility to include the care that is rendered by those individuals.
Yes, I've worked with nurse practitioners in the past. I'm fully aware of that.
Make a motion
I'm ready.
to approve the restoration of the full
Okay.
practice authority.
So there's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Who was second?
McClendon. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The request is granted.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Yep.
That motion is to lift prescription.
Yep.
Next is agenda item 18, is that correct?
Yes.
This is a consent order, Dr. Wayne Liu, and I'm probably butchering his name, I apologize. This is a mirroring action, reciprocal discipline from an action by the Wisconsin board originally. As I understand the facts, and I do have copies of the Wisconsin order, if anyone like. Not have the original order, I apologize. I have the order, he's been restored. I have that order of the Wisconsin board, and we can make a copy of that for the record. He was restored on April 19th, 2023. However, this was a serious matter. Dr. Liu is a radiologist. He was doing teleradiology. He was practicing. He was in one state physically. He misread an image study for a Wisconsin patient. He failed to spot, I believe it's a Liz Frank fracture, and the patient developed complications and had to have, additional care necessitated by his error. And so Dr. Liu was reprimanded by the Wisconsin board and was given some other requirements. We believe because of the seriousness of this issue, this competence issue, that a reprimand by this board, as Dr. Liu is also a licensee of this board, is appropriate, even though he has now been restored to full status in Wisconsin. And this order also requires him to officially provide this board with evidence that he has completed all requirements of Wisconsin order of discipline. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
It seems like there has to be more.
I'd like to take a short break. We can get the original Wisconsin order, and so that you can see it has a much more detailed back description of the error that you made. I'd be happy to do that.
I mean,
Would that be your pleasure?
no, I'm not. I don't think it's going to
I mean, if it's
change
gonna
what we
help,
need to do, but it's curious that
well, if it's gonna provide you with some background or information that would make you feel more confident in your deliberation, then I think it's a reasonable request.
Dr. Kennard.
Does anybody else have any for initial response to that? Because you're using words like seriousness and gravity and compared to some of the other things we've discussed, misreading a fracture just seems like it could be a malpractice issue, but is it competency? Yeah, but is it just that single incidence of missing one fracture?
And I want to apologize, Dr. Kennard, because I have the wrong Wisconsin order in my hand, because relative questions might come up. Once in the past, I made the mistake of answering a question without checking my facts. So I would really,
I remember that day.
Hey, you learn from your mistakes.
Sure you do.
So,
But I would request the short break so we can get that just so that all the members are.
So how about this? Can we like just table this issue for a moment, proceed with the remaining items on the agenda, and then address this one at the end when we have and we can take that time at that moment rather than interrupting right now. We'll just keep going.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
let's just do that. So we'll put a pin in this one and come back to it once you have the original order.
I do apologize for that oversight. Next, I believe, is item number 19, an order of temporary suspension of Cosmin Debrescu, MD. Dr. Debrescu practices in several states, including Alaska, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, and at least one state of the Midwest. State of Alaska first, disciplined Dr. DeBrescu after an adverse event during a surgical operation, a serious adverse event. He was immediately suspended by the state of Alaska. The states of Louisiana and Alabama and Illinois have already mirrored the action by the state of Alaska. And Dr. Cleveland found that if Dr. DeBrescu was lying, had come to Mississippi to actively begin practicing, that it would be an immediate danger to the citizens of the state. Therefore, he entered the order of temporary suspension, and the documents are there. Dr. DeBrescu accepted electronic service and immediately called within 15 minutes and called and requested a continuance of his hearing. As you know, when we do an order of temporary suspension, statute requires that they be given a hearing, given a hearing, within 15 days. As opposed to giving a minimum time, it has to be within 15 days. So Dr. DeBrescu accepted it and requested continuance of this disciplinary matter. So the order of temporary suspension, if the board accepts the continuance, will continue, and all terms in the in the order of temporary suspension will continue until ultimately resolved by this board.
So the motion that we need will be for continuance,
Just grant continuance.
because the temporary suspension is in effect. And so this is really a motion for continuance.
Yes, ma'am, it is. Sorry.
No problem. I just wanted to make sure I was clear.
No, sir, he's licensed, but he's licensed to practice, and we may be I believe we are perhaps the last state in which he holds an active license where he could practice.
But he's not, man.
Not as far as we're aware, no. When he called me, and he accepted service, and he called me, I believe he was in Canada. And I have no idea what he.
You need a motion
there
to approve the
motion?
continuance. I'll make that.
Okay.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That continuance is granted.
Excuse me for the noise, I apologize.
No problem.
Agenda item 20. Will require the board to go into executive session pursuit based on the investigation exemption to the open meetings law. There are 2 investigative subpoenas that the board is going to be requested to issue. So I request the board close the session to consider that.
Can I have a motion to close the meeting?
Move to close the meeting to consider whether to enter into executive session last night.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, our meeting is closed and we will reconvene shortly. All right, we are now in open session and Dr. Joyner will read the actions from executive session.
In executive session, the board voted to approve subpoena 2023-028 and voted to approve subpoena 2024-010.
Thank you. At this time, we will return to our agenda and go back to pick up item number 18. If that's okay.
Yes, ma'am. And once again, obviously, Dr. Kennard's instincts were correct. You'll be getting another consent order for Liz Frank in the near future. Dr. Kennard was absolutely right. This was a much more serious issue. You can read on page 2, a copy was provided to each of you of the order of the Wisconsin board dated February, signed by Dr. Liu on the 25th of February and issued by the board on the 27th. I've had a copy of that and asked that it be made a part of the record. So this is the misread that led Dr. Liu to be disciplined. Yeah, I would rather be wrong than admit it and make sure you have all the information. So I appreciate it.
Sure.
Correct that. So I would request that the board approves the consent order for Dr. Liu.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Second.
I guess I'd like to say that usually something like this, it's not just this case. Like this was the tip of the iceberg, probably, of whatever's going on.
I'm sure you're correct, Dr. McClendon. They don't, we don't get the full investigative file, but what is in the consent order and stipulation of facts was probably a negotiated thing between the board and the doctor, but is sufficient, I believe.
And while we don't address the civil component of concerns related to malpractice issues, if those issues do kind of cross over into competence or other harm to the public, then sometimes those issues do get brought before boards. And like nationally, you see different boards respond to these in different ways or at least adjudicate them very differently. So when you brought that up, Dr. Kennard, I thought it was a very good point just of how some of those things may come our way, or we may see actions in other boards that may be a little different than the things that we're asked to take on here. Yeah. All right. So got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor? And opposed? All right. Motion passes.
And Madam President, letting out council does no further matter.
Thank you very much. All right. Last item on the agenda right now is the September board meeting dates. Just using our calendars, the board meeting date would normally be scheduled for the 20th and the 21st. I think that Ms. Morris had mentioned that there was a conflict on her end. I know there's also a conflict on my end with that date. Anybody else have any issues? Dr. Gibbons, this is usually the time of the year when you are also unavailable. So
it's the question, am I available on the scheduled date? Yeah,
on
that's
the scheduled day, or do we need to look to a different day?
I'm not sure how to take that. But I'm available and it is locked in as listed.
So, no, you can't. So I know for sure I have a conflict with a meeting out of town on the 20th and 21st. I think, don't
Yes,
you
our
think?
entire division will be going to a conference in Chicago, so we can find someone. It just probably won't be anyone that y'all have ever seen before, but that's fine. So
Because the whole division's
the
out.
whole division is going. Yeah.
Anybody else have conflicts? Because I would be willing to propose maybe moving it to the 13th and 14th.
What date are we talking about?
September 20th and 21st is the date that is right now tentatively scheduled.
I would not be available on the 14th.
Okay. Is there another day? Okay. So 20th and 21st? All right. So be it. And I just also would like to remind everyone about our retreat that will be taking place in a matter of weeks. Just a reminder to everybody, thank you all for those of you who have RSVP'd for your availability. We'll be looking forward to retreating together. Any other issues? Anybody? Executive Director, anything?
Nothing further, Madam President.
If nothing further, then meeting, can I get a motion for adjournment? Sorry, can't just end it. Motion for adjournment. So I could, but I wanted to, there would be a Democrat.
Great job, man.
Also, this is the shortest board meeting we've ever had. We are now on.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
It's a long.
Meeting is now officially adjourned. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, but then I would have got my.